Hello, my name is Jeroen Trappers, and in this screencast I will explain how to build MainWindow.xib so that you can get a better understanding on how an iOS application starts if you have to use Xcode 3 projects. So I'm going to start by opening Xcode and create a new project. We'll use this empty application template so that we can build everything from scratch. This will give you the best understanding of how the MainWindow.xib really works. So I'm going to give it a name here, MainWindow.xib demo. We'll build for the iPhone, and we'll also use automatic reference counting so that we don't have to worry too much about memory management at this time. Click Next, choose a certain location. This is good, it's in my demos folder. You can put it in a local Git repository if you want to, but for the demo that's not necessary. So what we get when we run the template here is an app delegate. And if we look at the project settings, we can see that there is no main interface defined here. That's normal for an Xcode 4 application because actually you can also initialize a new application in a different way. But for demonstration purposes and to understand how an Xcode 3 project really starts, I'm going to build it manually. So here we start by adding the MainWindow.xib ourselves. So the next step is to create a new file. So we do File, New File, or you can also do Command N. And here we select the user interface. So if you're not in that tab, you have to go there, and we choose an empty user interface document. It's called Interface Builder here, and that's because the old tool in Xcode 3 was a separate tool called Interface Builder to build the visual elements that made up the user interface. Now these days in Xcode 4 it's built into Xcode itself, but the name still is there. We click Next, we are still indeed developing for the iPhone. Again we click Next and we call this MainWindow.xib. The name here actually is not important. You could call it whatever you want because we're going to select that zip file to be the startup interface anyway. So we create it in that directory. You can change the directory if you want to, and we click Next. So because I selected this file before I added it, it's going to be added here, but you can move it around if you want to. So here we end up with an empty user interface document that we can now use to define all the objects and all the relationships between the objects that make up an iOS application. So you have to imagine the application is going to start up later on, and all the objects that we define in this user interface document are going to be created when this document is loaded into memory. And now we have to define the identity of all the objects that are going to be here and the relationships between them. So the first thing I'm going to do is talk about file owner. If we open up the inspector window here and go into the identity inspector, we can see that for the moment the identity of the file owner is set to an NS object. So any object could be the file owner of this user interface document. We want to change that to be the UI application. So we change the class name of the file owner. So the relationship between the user interface document here and the object that owns the object that are created when the user interface document is loaded into memory is being defined here. So now if we create this MainWindow.xib, we know that the UI application is going to be linked to the objects that we create here visually. So that's the first step. Add UI application or type UI application here so that we know that the file owner is going to be an object of the type UI application. The next thing we're going to do is add an object here. The object is in the library, so you can click this button if you want to, and then scroll down if you want to. You can do that by just looking for object, and here you will find it, but you can also filter this list if you just type here. That's a little bit easier. So we're just going to drag and drop it in here. And this object now is an object that is going to be created when the user interface document is loaded into memory, when the application starts. But again, the identity of the object is not very strongly defined. It's just an NS object, any object would do. Now what we are going to change here is that this object is going to be the application delegate. So the application delegate is an object that we have here that we got for free when we defined, when we used the template. And we specify that this object that we created here is of that type. So when the user interface document is loaded into memory, an object of the type AppDelegate will be created. That's how you should read and understand the definition of this object. The other thing that we're going to add is a window. We always need a window in an iOS application because that's where the user interface is going to be drawn. So we put a window also in our designer. That's it. That's the objects that we need. Now we can start by defining the relationships between these objects. So the UI application is going to have to be linked to the application delegate. So if we go in here and go into the connections inspector, we can see that the delegate currently is not set for the file owner. So we can drag and drop from this little red little circle and put it on the application delegate. So now the relationship between the UI application and its delegate has been defined. This is how you should think about this. Now we also want to link the window to the application delegate. If we want to do this, we have to go into the code that makes up the application delegate. Because I'm going to close this, we can see that the property has been defined because the template defines this, but this is not going to be visible to the interface builder here because IB outlet is not defined here. So the property is there, but to make it visible in the interface builder, we have to annotate it with the IB outlet keyword. So now this variable, this property of the type UI window pointer is going to be an IB outlet, so that if we go back to the user interface document, and I'm opening my inspectors again, if we now show the application delegates connections, the window is going to be here. If you wouldn't have put IB outlet in the code there, it would not show up here. So IB outlet doesn't add any functionality. The only thing that it does is make properties visible to interface builder so that we can start defining connections visually here. So now that we have a window outlet, we can connect it to the window. And that's it. Now we have everything to start building the application. Just to finish off the demo, I'm going to find a label here and put it in the window, just nicely centered, and I'm going to put hello MainWindow.xib. This is something you would normally not really do. You would define a view controller to do this. Normally you don't put anything directly into the window. You would put a view of a view controller in the window, but for the demo here, this will suffice. So now that we have defined everything, the only thing that remains is that we have to specify that this user interface document should be used to start up the application, and we specify it in the main interface here. So let's make some room again, and we select it here. If we run the application now, so it builds and runs in the simulator here, we can see indeed that the application now has its window and has the view, the label here that we have put inside there. The application is still complaining that the main window or the applications are expected to have a root view controller at the end of application launch. Indeed, we didn't define a view controller yet. That's something I can do in the next demo. If we go back to the application delegate here, so I stop the debugger and the application delegate, this is normally the entry point of the application. Because we have defined everything visually, we have created that window by dragging and dropping the object in our user interface document, we can remove the entire piece of code here because we're actually not setting up the application in the did finish launching with options. We did it by defining everything visually. So if we run again, the application is still working because actually the code that was here is not necessary for us. So I hope this was useful, and now that you have seen how to build MainWindow.xib, gives you a better understanding of how iOS applications that were built with Xcode 3 actually start up. Thank you for watching and hope to see you soon again. Bye.